Every once in a while, along comes a game that changes the way you think about gaming, and introduces you to a treasure trove of games you've missed out on. I should clarify up front that Espgaluda, or Espgaluda in its original pronunciation, is not only my favorite bullet hell game, but also my favorite shoot-'em-up, or shmup for short, and it has been for over 20 years now. Before getting into this review, however, I should mention how I got into the shmup genre in the first place. When I was very young, I played an ASCII-based Centipede clone called Bugs on my grandpa's old DOS computer. I had a lot of fun with it until he upgraded the computer and the game ran so quickly that it became unplayable. A few years later, I saved up some allowance money and got R-Type for the original Game Boy. I got it mostly because the cover art looked cool. It was brutal and unforgiving, but I just couldn't set it down. It was also the first shmup that I've played with an actual campaign as opposed to Bugs. Fast forward many years later to 2004, after getting burnt out on the turn-based JRPGs I played a lot of in high school, a close friend of mine introduced me to bullet hells with Espgaluda and Cyvarrior 2, as well as the non-bullet hell but still fearsome Gradius 5. Some of you may know him as the Popcorn Baron. Check out the link in this video's description for more info on him and his products. Anyway, after that I started collecting and playing the hell out of many shmups I missed out on over the years, including Einhander, Mars Matrix, and Bangayo, just to name a few. There's pretty much nothing about this game that I don't love. Besides the all-important gameplay mechanics, I was also drawn in by the visual style, the soundtrack, and the bullet patterns, which are especially distinct during the game's boss fights. The gameplay of Espgaluda revolves around switching between two forms, Normal Mode and Kakusei, or Awakened Mode. When you shoot down enemies in Normal Mode, you get green gems. After you've accumulated them, you can press a button to enter Kakusei Mode. In this mode, your green gems deplete, but when you kill enemies, all of their bullets are cancelled and become gold ingots, which are the game's multipliers for its scoring system. It's also worth mentioning that enemy bullets become significantly slowed down while in this mode. If your gems become fully depleted in Kakusei mode, you go into what's called Kakusei Overmode, wherein bullets become incredibly sped up and you no longer get gold ingots from fallen enemies, but you're basically given a steady increase in points just for surviving. For many new players, it may be ideal to not let Kakusei Overmode kick in. However, this mode does benefit your score in a few ways. I'm trying to keep this video short, but for anyone interested in the many nuances of Espgaluda's mechanics and scoring system, as well as its surprisingly creative story, I've included a link to its page in the Shmup's wiki site. The neat thing about the whole Kakusei system is that it can appeal to both beginners who may just want to use it for survival, or the more hardcore players who can use it to chase high scores. While there are some ideal routes for optimal scoring, the game does give you a bit more freedom to improvise than, say, the Dodonpachi series or Guwange, where the stages are designed around strict stage-long or even game-long enemy chaining. Like many shmups of the time period Espgaluda was released, you can choose between different characters to play as, each with their own gameplay properties. Ageha, meaning butterfly, moves more quickly with a strong narrow firepower, while his sister Tateha, meaning moth, covers a wider area with her shots and lasers on screen at the sacrifice of movement speed. Whichever one you should choose boils down to your playstyle. The game doesn't have a second loop, but for anyone wanting a brutal challenge reminiscent of one, the PS2 port includes an arrange mode which plays like a combination of Espgaluda and the game it's a spiritual sequel to, Esperade. The player characters Black and Chihiro play much like JB5th and Irori from Esperade. In this mode, the game assaults you with significantly denser bullet patterns, but the scores you can reap from them are insane. I would dare say this is still the best arrange mode of any cave game to date. Overall, I honestly have nothing bad to say about this game. Some may find an issue with the game's short length, roughly 25 to 30 minutes, which is par for the course for most shoot-'em-ups, though if you're seasoned in the genre and aiming for high scores or chasing that one credit clear, that short amount of time will be an intense one. If you didn't have a prior interest in shmups, or only have a small amount of experience in them, I'd highly recommend checking this game out. In terms of gameplay, there really isn't anything else like it out there except for its sequel, which is currently available on Nintendo Switch and a few other platforms. If you've already tried multiple shmups of different gameplay styles and just don't dig them, this may not be the game that changes your mind. though I'd at least suggest giving the soundtrack a listen. Also, while pretty much any arcade game with co-op is fun to play with a friend, the existence of the Kakusei system means that both players will be punished if, say, one of them stays in Kakusei mode long enough to trigger Overmode and doesn't change back to the normal mode right away. Espgaluda, in terms of multiplayer, is only thoroughly enjoyable if both players are coordinated with one another and know exactly what they're doing. It's not an ideal game to dive into co-op without prior experience in the single-player game. Anyway, if you've watched this video in its entirety and are hearing this, thank you for sticking around. It was my first video game review. I'll be reviewing more niche or otherwise lesser-known games from multiple genres. I also occasionally stream on Twitch, see the link in the description.